Hello, everybody. Steve, are you there, Steve?
There we go. I am.
Perfect.
I am, and I appreciate it.
Ready
Dave.
to rock and roll.
I gave you this glowing introduction. I talked about how you've been instrumental in the development of Racelands, and we've had the two kind of introductory beginnings to kind of unwrap the layers, and really it's the proverbial onion, and each layer of knowledge and understanding will help players utilize all the tools that are at their disposal, and there's no better tool and no more central tool to Racelands than the angles. There's the group of them that come with the package, but then all of us can utilize our understanding of races and of trainers and of the kinds of karma moves that they utilize, and we can build our own, we can test them in Racelands, and then we've got that extra kernel of information that perhaps other players don't, and that's the edge everybody's looking for.
Yes, well, we're certainly hoping that we can provide that, and we're going to go into some depth today on the exact area you spoke of, angles, and the feedback that we've gotten so far on the product, and it is one of the most used areas. In fact, it's not just the feedback, we're able to actually see it by usage, and we'll walk folks through to give them a little bit more information on really how to use those and how to make the best of them.
Well, let's actually kind of poke around. I mean, I'm sure, Dave, there's some people that are joining us that maybe visited with us the first webinar or maybe last week. Maybe just give them again the basic lay of the land and how the layout, what the interface that they're seeing.
Exactly, I will do that. I'm going to make a couple of announcements though first. It's always a good idea to do this at the beginning of the webinar, so it'd be best off if folks use the tool there to make the screen as large as you can. I know sometimes it's hard to see that kind of stuff and zoom in. Also, there's a panel on the webinar screen for asking questions. So we have two of the other folks that have been very much involved and who hosted the webinar 2 weeks ago, Chris and Ellis, who will be addressing those questions. And I've seen some of them had some issues with audio. Hopefully that's all in good shape now, but if you have any issues with that, post them. And we have Taylor, our technical expert, standing by to try to help folks through that. So I'm going to stay focused on the matter at hand, which is the product itself. And just before I get to that, let me do 3 plugs. Most important plug is that we are offering another webinar special that all of the subscriptions, which are 1, 3, and 12 months, which gives users access to every feature of the product, that's going to be half off through Sunday night. And also, as everybody saw in the invitations, we're going to have a giveaway at 5:45 today. Anybody who is that is online, that is not an employee of Equibase, will be entered into a random drawing, and we will contact that winner on Monday, and that person will get a free 3-month subscription, which is worth about $500. And of course, the most important announcement of them all by far, is that on Saturday, Cal Expo opens, and I'll be racing in 7 races that night. There we go.
That is the most important thing of it. Absolutely.
There you go. So if I'm not in a webinar 2 weeks from now, I probably got dumped on the track, and that was the end of it. But now let's turn our attention to angles, and we'll talk about. There's really 2 ways to use angles. The primary goal is to take a theory that you have on racing and to test it using history. And the folks at Stats have done a great job in putting this together. And we're going to go through a couple, 2 examples of that and how to use them. And then if there's time, we could potentially take a suggestion or 2 from the attendees and see if we can do an angle for them. So you can go test them. And then once you find something that's good, the system will notify you in a variety of ways, and we'll demonstrate those, that angle is upcoming in a race tomorrow or the next day or the next day. And that's the valuable piece. And also people learn by angles. So they'll start with something, and we'll go through this in a minute, and then refine it a little bit further to see if even within an angle you'll be able to optimize it and find potentially even greater returns. So let's dive into this, and hopefully everybody's seeing this on the screen. We click on the Manage Angles button, and this is where things start. And we're going to go create a new angle. And I have done some looking at this with help of Craig Walker, who's really the expert on the product on the West Coast, and Ellis Starr's counterpart, who resides on the East Coast. And we're going to go take a look at an angle here and create one that's really aimed at first-timers and trying to see when a first-timer is primed and ready to go. So we're going to start with the case element of angles, and there's 4 of them. We'll go through a couple of them: filter, profile, stats, and case. And case is very, very sort of specific to situations. And you'll see what we're going to do on this first one is we're going to take a look at first-time starters. And the way we find first-time starters is we look at how many days between starts. Now, for a regular horse, it'll show 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, but if a horse is for his first time, of course, there are no days between. So we're going to look at first-time starters, and then we're going to go take a look at a specific workout pattern. So we're going to look at workouts, top workout of the day, and we'll look at those that are exactly 4 furlongs that have done so recently, meaning specifically here within 7 days. And we're going to go ahead and add that criteria. So far I'm calling this like the angle builder. So I have first-time starters who have had a bullet workout at 4 furlongs within the last 7 days. And we're going to take a look specifically at sprint races. So we can filter the races, and the filter button basically looks at the races for today, race conditions for today. So here we're just going to look at sprint races. Now, one of the other aspects of the settings is this little gear button to the left, which allows you to do some further refinements. Just to give you an example, the one on the filter side, which we're not going to use right now, allows you to drill down by specific races. Now, the default here is thoroughbred races, but if you specifically wanted to look at quarter horse races or any combination of races, you can go ahead and click on those. A week ago, Friday, they raced at Pleasanton out here in Northern California, and they ran mule races. And we actually looked at some statistics for mules. I know most portions of the country don't do that, but as they say, the nuts roll west, and that's where we did it. So specifically down to cases, one of the things related to workouts is how many workouts at a particular track did it take to qualify to get a bullet. And certainly a bullet out of 5 workouts is an awful lot different than a bullet out of 20 workouts. So this one right now is set at 5 workouts. So we can go ahead and we're going to name the particular angle. And just so it comes up to the top of my list, I'm going to name it with some 1s here. And I'll put here webinar 1. And specifically, I'm going to vary the number of workouts that basically was the minimum number for the bullets for each day. So I named it. I'm going to save it. And then we're going to go test it. This is the back test, and you'll see in a minute that you can vary the time periods. It defaults to the longest time period, which is 1 year, and we'll go ahead and generate the back test results. And this is reminding me up here what I've done. And it says it can take up to 15 minutes. It's actually more like 1 or 2 minutes to do it. So we'll go ahead and click on OK. And now this is quite a complicated thing to happen basically in stats land when they go and do these calculations. So we will get a notification when this angle is done. So this will be a good time while we're waiting for that basically to cook in the oven to show you this one button here, which is the settings, and that's the notification preferences. And there's 2 sets of these. One is just basically telling you when files are ready, and you can get messages either via email, via text message, or in-app, which means if you're in RaceLens, it'll pop up and alert you to it. Similar for early final files and program changes. You can also narrow it down, not for all, but you can go in and select specific tracks to get those notifications. And then for what we just did for angles, you can have different types of notifications when you go and search for these angles into the future. You can vary it by track. You can vary it by specific angles. Here we're going to have a notification for our back test being completed. And again, you can do it for email, by text message, or inside the application itself. So what will happen inside the application, and hopefully this will come up here in a minute. If not, I have done this one, and I'll be able to, oh, look at that, just like Johnny Carson, right on cue. See this number 1 that came up here, we call it a badge, and that tells me something just came up. So I click on the alerts to see what it's all about. And as this is going to populate, it's going to tell me in a minute that the results for the angle that I just generated, that one that I named 1111, webinar 1, that it's been generated. So I could go back through the manage angles and get to it, or I can just quickly shortcut it and get to it by what I just looked at. So here's the results. It's telling you again exactly what the criteria for the angle was. We found 185 different races with 197 starters. So there were some races with 2 or more of these horses that fit that condition. A nice win percent of 16%, and an important number, the ROI of a positive 7%. So this worked out pretty well. We also have been asked about what this success score is, and I think we talked about this a couple of webinars ago. And that success score is a number that ranges between 1 and 10, and 10 being the most powerful number. And it basically measures a combination of the win percent, the ROI, and how many starts was in the sample size to see if it was relevant or not. So you might have something like a 50% ROI, but if it was only in 10 races, the success score might be a number like 4. But if you had, let's say, a 3% ROI over 1,000 races, I mean a really significant sample size like that, you may see that the success score would be something closer to 9, like that. So we're going to go back and do some editing of this particular angle. So I'm going to sort these, and there's my webinar angle. I'm going to bring it back up, and I'm going to click on the edit button. So this allows you to start, I'll edit the angle that I just did, but it allows you to start with one of the existing angles that our experts have done, or potentially one of your own that you go through and you want to modify it a little bit. So the only modification I'm going to do here is I'm going to take that minimum number of workouts for a bullet and raise it from 5 to 10. I'm going to apply it. And then I'll go ahead and change that number from 5 works, just so I remember what it is, to 10 works. I'll save the angle, and then I'm going to go ahead and run another back test on it. There it's reminding me about what I'm doing. And once again, this is going to go on now in the background. And it's like the other one took a couple of minutes to run, this will probably be something similar to that. So while we're waiting for that, this is just a good spot to stop. And Steve, you can tell me, like, how are you using angles, or how do you view the power of angles?
Well, it basically just anything that I like out of the movement you see in terms of a trainer, whether it's a dirt to turf combination, a dirt to turf, route to sprint, the multiple layers of a horse's potential in that you see when you're just going through the past performances, and there's that layering of circumstance to try to see what history there is, because there's nothing left really in the game anymore that except trainer intent. and trainer, habit, and practice. It's really the last frontier because so many of the top layer statistics are there for everybody. So unless you add that next layer of angle and then go and dig deep and let a service like this, let the power of the computer to delve into the past performances for whatever period of time you want to utilize, it's the only way you're going to source a piece of esoterica that other players don't have at their fingertips.
Right. Good points, all good points. So the angle came back actually pretty quickly there. So as you would expect, a slightly smaller number of races when we increase that workout period or number of workouts to basically have a bullet work, because a bullet at a now 10 is more impressive than a bullet at a 5, and it doesn't always work out this way, but in this case it did work out, that we even found more success. So we still found a reasonable number of races out over the last year. Okay, so 154 starters over the last year. So it's about 10, 12 per month. Okay, so 12 per month means there were 3 plays a week. That's pretty decent. Okay, and a solid win percent, solid success score, as reflected by the combination of win percent, a hefty ROI of 23% over a course of 154 starts. So we're sort of on to something here. Okay, this isn't just pure sort of accidental anymore. So I'm going to do one last edit to this one. So we'll go ahead and we'll sort it, and hopefully there it is. That's the same one. I'm going to edit it. So we went up from 5 workouts to 10 workouts. So now let's double up and see what happens here. So we'll go up the workouts to 20. Notice that you can go higher. You can go all the way up to 50. When you get up to a level like that, you're not going to obviously be very few. It's only 2% of them or so are bullet workouts. We'll apply that. I'm just going to change the name to 20 workouts so I remember what I have there. And I'll go ahead. You guys can't see this, but I have something in the way. I'll save that angle. We'll click the back test. Oh, I think I messed up here. That happened too fast. So let me go back. Edit that workout. Change the workouts to 20. Yeah, unfortunately what you guys can't see is I have some stuff in front of me on the screen here that I have to keep getting out of the way. I'm going to change the name to 20 workouts. I'm going to save it. And now hopefully this will work. Somehow it's doubling up and it's already, so I'm going to just call it. I have to call it another name, add a little X in front of this so I save it uniquely. And now we'll go ahead and run the back test and we'll generate the results. And again, it'll take another minute or so for these to come up. But what you would hope to find in a situation like this is something that was even better yet, because the meaning of that bullet workout is more significant when you are the best, top out of 20 rather than the top 1 out of 10. And I said, if you had the email notification set, you'd be notified by email. You could be notified by SMS, but right now we're in-app. And what should happen is up here in the notification section, when this angle is completed running, I'll get a red badge, and it'll come up and tell me. So we're doing this real time. It depends on how many people are on the system. It depends on your internet speed, things like that, to see how fast it is. It is unfortunately, it's not instantaneous. We're doing work to get this faster and faster and faster. But boy, let me tell you, Steve, it's at roughly 500,000 starts a year, but these kind of specifics in an angle, it's an awful lot to go through. So while we're waiting on
no doubt.
Yeah, I'll remind folks about these angles. We do put them out there in our Twitter feed, and that's at Stats Race Lens, and those are updated daily. We go through and we find an angle of the day, and they're also shared on our Facebook page. We share them on some broadcasts as well, but that's also a good way to get started on your own angles. And then you can take them and modify them from there. So unfortunately, this one's taking long to come up. Let me go back to the home page and see if that'll move it along at all. It's not ready quite yet. But I think we're going to go, we won't wait for this. We'll go ahead and move along and see if there were any particular questions out there, Steve, that you had or that you've written. I can't follow them all because they're flying by so quick from folks that are out there. If there's anything we want to talk about further before we move on to another angle.
Well, and I've got to do the same thing you do, which is move some things down to go back to get the screen. So it's always a little bit of a hoop jump. Hold on.
Yeah. So while we're doing that, I can describe a little more about the angle screen. So one of the things that you see here is the source of the angles with this little filter. And you see an awful lot of them that are the stats source. This is my login, DS2733. And so you can sort them by that. You can sort them by angle name. Or you can also use this checkbox system. So if I only want to see my angles, that's what I have there, you can just click on that. And down the road, you're going to see angles sourced by third-party handicappers. I don't want to name any names right now, but Joe Handicapper, and you'll see those in there. So you'll be able to sort them or just select them by the source. And of course, as I said, you can sort them by the angle name as well. So I am seeing this. I don't know why. Maybe I missed that notification, but I am seeing this on my list. So we'll see if this comes up. So here's the back test of the angle that we just did. So as makes sense, you'd see a lot fewer data points. The last one was a 140s or so, or 150s. Now it's 90 because it's more selective. It's the top workout of the day out of 20 rather than 10. And we have a whopping ROI of 41% and a real nice success score of 7.3. So you could go on and go up to 30 and 40 and see what happens. The ROI could go up. Unfortunately, the sample size is going to drop down, so it's not as meaningful. But as I said, even over a one-year period, you're talking about 7 or 8 plays a month to a week on something like looks pretty darn good, and it's held up quite well over time.
Space between, yeah.
So
82. 2 stars. I'm just kind of thumbing through here too.
Yeah, I see somebody asked about here 80 angles. Is that too many? So I would say the answer is no, but it depends how you use them. So you would probably that'd be too many on the alert side, and I'll go back to the main screen and show you how some of these things show up. But as you saw in the notification section, you can narrow that down, and you can go through and only get notified for specific angles. Let me show you. So this will go to my angle list, and it'll say, okay, maybe when I'm in the program, I want to see all of the angles, all 80 if you had that, but I want you to go out there and email me, for just, well, I'll call it my top 10 angles, and you can use the notification screen to filter that through that, and then potentially see those races and dive into those races a little bit further. Also going back, just in terms of the home screen, and we covered this in the previous webinar. Over on the left for each track for the angles that you have. So if you have 80, like that individual had, these numbers would be higher. But this is how many angles for the active angles that I have that are showing up. So if I felt that really 58 was too many, you would just move some of the angles from the active side to the deactivated side. You still want to save them. You don't want to have to redo that work, but then they wouldn't be indicated here. And then down at the race level, so here for Belmont's first race, this horse had one angle, and this angle for mine, it happened to be some trainer with blinkers on. So that resulted in positive ROIs. So the numbers here indicate the number of angles. And we're actually, this product really is never standing still. Okay, there's changes and upgrades happening to it literally every week, and we had some great feedback from users about this particular issue with a number of angles showing up that everything's in red. So we are going to be making a change, and I'm not remembering all the specifics, but they'll be color coded in red, green, and yellow that have to do with how many angles are there and how many of them have high success scores. So you could even get to answers more quickly. Basically, looking for the green colors will be the top rated angles that you yourself have put into play.
Well, that's a nice that's a nice feature, because it would immediately pick out, you know, potentially prime opportunities, you know, just based on your own, you know, what we like as individual players.
Right. Exactly. So why don't I go on to we'll create a totally different angle. If Steve, if you're good with that, if there weren't any more questions you wanted me to address.
I think, yeah, between the guys that are on the applet, they're banging away answers left and right. If there's anything, you know, if any of the attendees, if you want to see something that, you know, that Dave could build at your suggestion, something that you're curious about, feel free to ask, and we can incorporate that. But otherwise, absolutely, Dave, dig in and you know, something else that is a little bit more, you know, a little bit more on the racetrack, you know, more statistic driven.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and go through another one. So we'll take a look at. I'll just sort of wing this as we go along. So we're going to start with stats. When the stats, as you see here, are particular to what we call players, and the players are horse, jockey, trainer, sire, dam, and owner, which will appear in some other places. So we're going to take a look at jockeys, and we're going to look at jockeys who have handled certain types of horses in a particular way. So we're going to look at jockeys who have ridden horses who are typically trailers coming from behind. And coming from behind in this context means at least 5 lengths back at the first point of call, who are winning at a rate of greater than or equal to 10%. So this is somewhat random that I'm going to do, but it's just to sort of show the overall power of what you can do with angles. So then we'll go on and take a look at, you talk specific tracks. So we're going to include a specific track, and here I'm going to go after Keeneland, but you can do any track or combination of tracks. You can keep adding them, so it could be Keeneland or Laurel or Turfway Park, all in one. But right now we're just going to take a look at Keeneland, and we'll go ahead and take a look just at dirt races. And you can, again, combinations of dirt or all weather or inner dirt for Aqueduct. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at the horse's running style inside a profile. So again, we talked about the players, and we have 6 of them: jockey, trainer, horse, sire, dam, and owner. And in this case, we're going to look at the horse's running style. And this is something that's proprietary to the Stats Race Lens in terms of how a horse typically runs a race. And so you see different types of running styles here. And here we'll look at a horse that just runs pretty even, sustained. So we'll go ahead and save this angle. I'm just going to put 1s again so it shows up on the top. Sustained jockeys. Call it whatever you like. We'll save it. And we'll go ahead and back test it and generate the back test. Now, well, actually, it's good that it's still there. This particular type of query that is based on run style is fairly complicated, and we had to do a lot of groundwork to get it in place to operate right. So these results, even though it says a year here, are going to be limited to just the data going back to May 1st. This will get better as it goes forward and as we just move forward. So obviously by next May, you'll be able to get the full year's worth of data. But it was all kinds of number crunching and backfilling basically to get to that spot. And like we said before, it's going to take a couple of minutes. It could be a minute, it could be 3 or 4 minutes. We wrote that at 15 minutes to be able to cover basically all situations. But when we're back there, we'll get a notification here shortly, and then it'll come and see the results. And once again, if it's something that I like, we'll be able to go back into the angles and do a search for particular race cards going forward, or for all race cards. You could name your tracks for the notifications as you saw, or just get notified for all tracks via text, via the app itself, or through the email that you put into place. So we're going to have to wait a minute or two, Steve, for this. And I guess while we're waiting, I'll just remind everybody I threw out this plug early on. I'll do it again, that all this great stuff that you're seeing, you can do yourself to your heart's content with a subscription. There's half off for the 1, 3, and 12-month subscriptions until Sunday. And one lucky person is going to get a subscription at zero cost. We'll do a random drawing from the names that are folks that are still of the 110 or so that are attending this webinar. We'll do that at 5:45, and the good folks at Equibase will notify the winner on Monday.
Just looking through some of the questions too, Dave, and I'm just thinking that angle is going to be a little tough if it only goes back to May, because of course you lose Keeneland spring meet. So
exactly.
It's only going to have been the last handful of days. But what is very interesting about that kind of a search is, we all have preconceived notions about certain riders in certain kinds of situations, and what an angle like that can do for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that people utilize as a way to get regular notifications of a jock on a certain kind of horse. I mean, not that you can't do that, but to me, that kind of a test is a way to kind of check yourself regarding your impressions that Jose Ortiz is so much better on a speed horse. By having that at your disposal, and you mentioned the proprietary aspect. I don't think there's a way to do that, with any other search engine in terms of back checking a rider under those kinds of conditions. And you might also be able, if you have a notion about a rider. I mean, I say anecdotally that Kent DeSormo and Julian Leparoux, when they're on front end horses, are outstanding. Well, you can test your own impressions of things like this, utilizing the lens and letting it do the actual work for you. You may have a notion that you can reinforce, and it becomes an angle that that you may have a big leg up on everybody with.
No, that's exactly right. And angles are truthfully as useful positively as they are in a negative direction. So out here we have, I think he's still the winningest jockey of all time, who has just recently retired, Russell Bays, and he won more than his fair share of races. But of course, a lot of it was in Northern California, where the fields are on the short side. So, a 16% win rate with a 7-horse field average is a heck of a lot different, actually worse than a 14% win rate at a place like Keeneland if they're averaging 10-horse fields. But the important thing is how much money you can make from them. And he was way overplayed. So while his win percents were high, his ROIs were low, and therefore our success score, would be not all that strong on somebody like that. So the results did come back in. It's not even the Gallup poll; it's the real result. And as you suspected, it was going to be a small number of starts because it only basically is looking at current meet at Keeneland. So through yesterday, basically, is where the data would be. And so we had 32 starters and 16% win rate, which I can't do in my head, but it's probably about 5. But 5 with 8% still positive ROI and a mid-range success score. Now, the reason that success score, again, is low, even with a decent ROI, I mean, given that the average ROI would be somewhere negative 18 if you bet everything. So we had a positive ROI, that's good. A solid win percent, but the sample size of only 32 starts is low. So that success score is a pretty good indicator of the overall strength of an angle, taking those 3 factors into account. So overall, this is one, it still isn't super significantly statistically significant, but it's good enough that you'd want to be alerted to those things, you know, especially you got a week to go at Keeneland or so, if any of these came back up.
And of course, the opportunity at any juncture during the course of a meet, you know, to get a feel for, you know, the numbers behind the numbers in terms of, you know, the running style that is prevalent. Great, you know, this is a great way to either reinforce notions or in some cases get enlightened to something you didn't necessarily see.
Right. Hey, you know, I'm looking at some of the questions, and I don't know if I'm interpreting this question correctly or not, but one of the people asked a question that I'm going to answer, even if it's the wrong question. It's actually fairly complicated. Is that if you go into the research section and you go and you run, let's say, call it a query of some kind, and you get a 10% positive ROI, and then you think you're going to do something similarly in backtest that you would think would come out to be the same number, and it doesn't. There's actually a lot of logic behind it. And it's a little bit complicated to understand, but I'll do my best. So the backtest is sort of looking back and looking forward all at the same time. So you'd want to know, let's say I said something like, I wanted to bet jockeys who had 10% ROI, period, that simple. What it would say is, I want to go back in history and for upcoming races, bet a jockey who had a 10% ROI in previous races. Now, just because they had a 10% ROI in previous races doesn't mean that every jockey that you wagered on in the upcoming race would end up with a 10% ROI. So what the backtesting tries to do is to simulate exactly what would have happened if you were there before the race. Another way to put it would be, hey, if there was a guy on the San Francisco Giants batting 300 going into a season, okay, and he batted 300 in the last 3 seasons, I want to know how successful he's going to be in the upcoming season. Well, the probability of him batting 300 in the upcoming season is slim. It's a pretty good indication that he's a strong hitter, but it's using the backward look to try to predict forward, where the research module only looks backward. It says, what was Russell Baze's ROI over the last 365 days? So it's a slight difference, but one is designed just to be straight research, and the other is designed to see how predictive would something have been. So again, it's a little bit confusing, but it's a real powerful piece of the backtesting, and that's how it differs from the research module. So I don't know if that helped answer the question that was out there, but that's what the difference is.
Reading through some of the other questions. Okay, John's asking, any filter to help find
long shots?
Help find long. Yeah, that's actually as opposed to us as players, Dave, connecting the dots to create a scenario. How could we structure something based on a result? I mean, if we were to even, go back to yesterday's results, there were actually a number of first-time starters. There were 3 of them yesterday. You had the 38-1 shot, Kim Royale of Engelhart at Belmont yesterday. You also had 40 acres at 33-1 at Keeneland and uncontested at 11-1 at Keeneland yesterday. Those were all firsters. How could we structure a query based on the fact that we know there's been some big prices? Say winners over 40-1. The last I don't know 90 days even, and then figuring out what a catch-all might be to carve out an angle to find those kinds of horses.
Sure. So we can there's a couple of things. One, certainly within the research module, is that you could take a look at things that have happened in the past with certain off odds. Of course, you really can't use off odds using back testing and a forward look, because the forward look, you never know what the horse is going to go off at. But let's play around just a little bit. We'll try to do this in real time. So you mentioned first timers. So you go into the case portion and add the criteria for first time starters. Then we could also use morning lines. And I got to just remember which section that the morning line is in exactly. So you got to give me a second here to find that one. Give me 1 second here. So profile, horse, morning lines. So we can say, okay, let's take a look at horses, because you're talking about long shots. Assuming that morning line is reasonably reflective of at least what the morning line maker thinks the public is going to do. So we could add the criteria of first-time starters who have morning lines of greater than 10-1. So this would be a good starting point. And now you could add in some other things like trainer, which we'll find under, I got to look at the players again. Give me just a second. So we could do a trainer who's hot, as we called it, let's say over here we're using a win percent of more than 25% over the last 7 days, something like that. And you could go on, and then you would save it. And we can go ahead and do this and see what happens. I have to name it first. So this is be first. Let me put the ones in front. First timer, long shot, hot trainer. Go ahead and save it. We'll also activate it, back test it, generate the back test results, and we'll see what happens. Now, of course, this is looking across all tracks. It's not looking at any kind of workout pattern, which is something else you could throw in. You could look at trainers' records with first-time starters, which I left out. You could look at sire and dam and how their offspring has done as a first-timer. So you have all these different elements that you can come in here and test those theories on. And even when you get down to sire and dam or trainers, you can be specific. It can be this Todd Pletcher and see how he's done in these situations, or any group of trainers that way. So there's all different ways to tackle that. That in this case, you asked about first-time starter long shot. Does that help, Steve?
Absolutely, absolutely, and you can you can see, and you can basically, the beauty of this is that when you maybe missed, or if you had an inkling that there was a horse that you had some interest in, and you didn't really necessarily know if you felt strongly enough that there was something to like to justify a play, when you go back, I mean, I talk regularly on the radio that we don't spend enough time reviewing what happened. I mean, especially if we lose. I mean, obviously, if we win, our notion and our interpretation of past performances, they obviously were correct enough, and the way we structured tickets was correct enough that we cashed. But when we lose,
Right.
our tendency is to quickly, look to the next day and we'll get them next weekend. This service and this product has a unique, with the back test, it has a unique opportunity to pick out successes and figure out what you may have missed in the previous opportunity, and then have a sifting method, have a way to pan for that gold the next time it comes down the stream.
Right, exactly. And so this one came back really quickly, and this is we just did this randomly. This is a great angle. This is a great angle. You may not see it, but I'm seeing it. So you had 1,100 starts in this situation in the last year, and what you see here with a crappy win percent and a lousy ROI is the public over-betting a hot trainer. That's how I interpret this. So 25% win percent, even over the last week is double about what it should be on an 8-horse field average, which would be 12.5. So you have these long shots being overbet. So you may say, this angle's no good. No, it isn't. This is a terrific angle. And especially when you see even with lots of starts and ROIs being negative, because that means there was something positive in these races. There's some other horses that are clearly being overlooked, and there's an awful lot. So this is one that you might go further to try to refine this, believe it or not, to make it worse. Like the worst, it's the mid-level stuff that isn't all that useful. When you come back with ROIs that are minus 15% and win percents that are 12%, you could throw a dart and have the same thing happen. But if you see, like we saw in the earlier ones, really positive ROIs and significant success scores, extreme, which is what we saw in the earlier examples, or you're seeing fairly extreme here with a really poor success score, that means there's other opportunities in that race because you want to zig when the public's zagging. And that's what's happened in this, and this was a contrived example that we just whipped up right now. So there is gold in them dollar hills on extreme positives and negatives.
And one of the things, I mean, once you're subscribed, you need to utilize it to the best of its ability. And I'm glad this came up. I mean, it came up inadvertently, but it's a terrific point, because if you were to single out probably the most overbet trainer on the landscape right now, it's certainly Chad Brown. And the opportunity to be subscribed to Race Lens and single out a trainer and probe all of the various constructs that you can think of. I mean, for instance, we're getting to a point where there's going to be horses moving to Florida next month, in the next 6 weeks. And so a chance to look at Chad Brown in Florida, Chad Brown during the winter in New York. One of the biggest angles that is underutilized right now in the game, we talk about the big outfits and the mega stables. Steve Asmussen has got literally a half a dozen strings in the Southeast, the Southwest, the East, and the Midwest. He's got basically 4 top assistants that run the different outfits, except that the statistics are all broken basically over, an umbrella. All of them are Steve Asmussen, except that, really in New York, it's Toby Sheets. And in Kentucky, it's Scott Blasi. And so you do have subsets. During the winter, Cherie DeVoe is running the outfit for Chad in New York. So if you take the time and utilize the entire, Equibase and stats information, you can find these subsets of performance that are within the greater stats that the general public are looking at. And the time you spend, I guarantee you're going to find in those regional subsets, you're going to find anomalies that fly in the face of the larger statistic. And in some cases, it might even be greater. I mean, if Chad overall is winning at 24%, well, guarantee there's a certain group of horses and a certain group of angles that are producing 45% winners. And you have got this, the power is there for you to do that, to go find those subsets. And does it take time, and is it some trial and error? Yes, but if you're subscribed, let the power of this tool do the work for you.
Well, thanks for saying that. I think you got a great grasp of it. Now, while you were speaking, just to show how easy some of this stuff is, one of the observers asked about a first-time gelding who had a layoff of 45 days. And I promise you, Steve, that this is not a shill. I had no idea this question was coming. But it was, literally a handful of mouse clicks, and you get that answer. I don't know what the answer is quite yet because it hasn't come back. But it's one that we'll be able to see. And if you were had the subscription to RaceLens, you'd be able to go in and get the answers to that. So it was straight out. We had a criteria for first-time geldings. We had a criteria for 45-day layoff, and boom, boom, and you get that answer.
And by the way, in terms of answers, a few things that we should highlight before we wrap up, and that includes the access on Twitter, certainly, first and foremost, in terms of following Stats RaceLens. During the race day, there's always somebody that that is going to see a query. If you make a direct a question to Stats RaceLens, you'll get the same kind of answers you're getting now. And of course, on the email front, just as responsive, the customer service team. If they don't have the answer immediately, they'll get it from the developers. And then we should remind about the hovering, utilizing your mouse. Everything that you see on the screen, when you hover over, you will get an explanation of what that image is, what that stat is. And there's the opportunity to utilize all the video tutorials. I mean, you're seeing this particular tutorial live, but there is countless video for you to enjoy and to help you when we're not doing things like this.
Yes, in fact, even the videos, I mentioned changes, and as we improve and change and upgrade the product, we even go back through the videos to make sure everything is lined up, just right. By the way, we have the answer to the question that one of the attendees asked. Not a very good angle on that layoff and first-time gelding. And again, similarly, even though it's not that good because the ROI is pretty significantly negative, you're probably seeing people overplaying that first-time gelding angle. And you could pull it out. You could remove the days between starts. That's what I would probably do next, and just see, are people overplaying first-time gelding? And you would see what that ROI is. So you would see what's really driving it more, the layoff or the first-time gelded, or some combination of them.
Well, and touching on the days angle, absolutely germane. Because chances are, I mean, when a horse is gelded, you want them running back in about 21 days. If there was 45 days or more involved, you're probably getting into a group of horses that were laid up for another, for a more significant injury and for a problem. You're talking about horses that might have been away 6 months, and while they were on the farm healing up, they also gelded them. So you're talking about horses that probably had some other issues in addition. You want a horse that raced. They said that's enough. We got to geld this horse. He heals up and he runs back in 3 weeks, as opposed to one that had disappeared and just happens to be gelded while he was away.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we covered an awful lot of ground here. Like you said, really the best way to understand the angles, of course, attending these webinars is great, watching the video, but when you have the subscription, there's no limit. You can go in and play with it all you want, and that's really the best way to learn it. And then when you have a monthly or longer subscription, you have full access to that. So Steve, before you close, if you're going to close, let me one last pitch here. So we're already past the mark where we're going to take the drawing, and Chris at Equibase will take all of those roughly 100 or 110 names and put them into a hat and pull one out and notify that person on Monday. But through midnight on Sunday, you saw all this great stuff in angles, and now you can get at it with half-off pricing. So it's really, I think it's about $64 is the half-off price for an unlimited monthly subscription, relative to the price of regular past performances or the other competition out there. It's really a bargain. You get all the race cars and all this deep knowledge, and we only scratched the surface today in terms of angles. We didn't talk about the research module. We didn't talk about true odds. We didn't talk about the PPs and how you can conditionally format those. So all sorts of great stuff, and that 50% off of 1 month, 3 month, and a year goes through Sunday night. So we hope folks will take advantage of that. And I think the next seminar is in 2 weeks. Those who register today and will get notification on it as well. And on the next one, we won't be talking as much about particular angles. We'll be diving very, very into the most important races of the year that everybody knows about in 2 weeks. The 10 claimer at Cal Expo. No, excuse me.
Yeah.
There's something else going on that weekend. Some other inconsequential event called the Breeders' Cup, also in California. And I think Ellis is teed up to go through that and to use RaceLens to help folks handicap those races. And we're really looking forward to that.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you and just everybody involved on the staff, and Chris and Craig, the whole staff at Stats RaceLens, ready to help players understand, and the customer service. In fact, a lot of players, just mentioning their interaction has all been positive. Whatever we can do to help players win and utilize the tool, we'll keep doing it. So thanks to everybody. The Twitter handle again, Stats RaceLens. Follow it, and you'll get pushes on the daily, the daily race of the day. Utilize that as often as you can, and that'll go a long way to helping understand. A lot of people like to be familiar, before subscribing, but you'll also, be in tune with any offers, and you can ask questions of the staff through the Twitter feed as well. So, Dave, thanks so much. Looking forward to getting out to California. Be out there next Saturday for Breeders' Cup through November 7th, and it's at hand, and this is a great time for people to get involved with the Stats RaceLens.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Steve, and thank everybody for attending. Have a good evening, all.